toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. Welcome, everyone. This is the third of a series of 4 classes called Opening Your Presence. And in each class, we're trying to go more and more deeply into what presence means and discover a way of experiencing presence that's probably different from how you've been accustomed to thinking about it and experiencing it. So chances are you've thought of presence as being something static, that here you are and you're becoming present to something else. It could be something in nature, it could be to another person, it could be something on an inner level, but you think it's something else that you're becoming present to. And in the case of, let's say, a great being or being present in a very sacred space, we tend to think of being present as just being able to pick up on the energy and feel what's coming from that person or that place. But as we're going to be exploring tonight, we're going to see that presence is something much more than that.
Yes, and the old way of thinking about it would be something like a security camera, just taking view of the actual physical evidence that's around that camera. And we might even think, well, presence is trying to get rid of our thoughts, all the things that keep us away from actually experiencing what's right there in front of us. But neither one of those is really where we want to go with this. And I found some amazing clues in a place that I never thought to look. It was in an article by Pierre Vilayet that he wrote, gosh, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, called The Spirituality to Come. And it's really speaking about different ways to be aware, different ways to think, really uniting with the thinking of the universe in a different kind of way, to amp up that realization of who we are, the sort of thing that we've begun in speaking about the human divine. Not wanting to give up the view of the human that's a here manifestation on earth, but also joining with something beyond that, that now we, through all these classes, I hope we're feeling like we're identifying as much with that divine self as we are with the human, and now a synthesis really more and more of the two. So one of the most dramatic things that I've taken from what Pierre has given us is the idea that rather than thinking of our bodies as a physical body and ourselves as a physical body and a crystallization, that you are subtle bodies, many different subtle bodies, from which the physical body is one crystallization. The magnetic field is one example, or the aura of these other fields, you could say that we are. But reaching beyond that, and this is the part that I love, is that you are a being of metaphor. You are existing as a reality that's not one that's a physical reality, but it's pure imagination. It's getting in touch with that aspect of ourselves that is creative imagination. We had a whole class on the imaginal realm, but we're speaking now as uniting all these different aspects of who we are in, really, I could say it as the story that's going on around us, and that's the story that is our story. And as Pierre Vilayet is speaking in this paper, it's the thinking of the whole universe. And accessing what is in the manifestation that you are most familiar with all the different ways of thinking, and not only thinking, but emoting, and not only emoting, but just having a great jubilation about what's happening around us. Some examples that occurred in my life just around preparing for this class, which I feel like are gifts from the universe in understanding what our purpose is. One was making bread. I created some flatbread today, and you might be familiar with the process of making it, but you have yeast that you let sit for a little while, and put the flour with it and the water, and begin to knead the dough. And when you turn it one way and push it another, and it's like you're making an interface. And I thought of us as in the classes that we brought up the idea of interface many times. But every time, and it was 8 minutes, that was a long time to be working this dough, massaging. And every time I did, though, I felt like it was another interface that was being created. And it really reminded me of this whole idea of the different ways of seeing, the different ways of being creative, the different ways that we see around us, the story being told. A story that Azerbaijan brought to me of a capybara. It's an animal that is so friendly to even crocodiles, little birds, and all the stories that are brought to us that really are kind of echoes of the heart. And we begin to recognize our own story in what we see around us. We begin to have a vast interface that is very softly reflecting one aspect into the other aspect, and this great familiarity that we begin to see, as Pierre Vilayet was saying, really the thinking of the whole universe. And this is what I brought you many times too, when I say, oh, nature is just such a teacher to me and to many of us. Well, why is that? That's again because of this interface that keeps being multiplied upon itself through our lives, through all the moments of our life, and through all the beings that we know, and all the different kinds of reflections that happen one upon another, that become this amazing familiarity, so that you can't say that, oh, I'm this separated being over here. This is, so let's bring the word presence in here. So this is like a presence that keeps growing and multiplying, and at the same time bringing an intimacy between all of the aspects, all of the qualities that we meditate upon in our practices, and all of the great beings that we have been a part of. This all becomes a way of increasing that interface and bringing presence upon presence upon presence. So that now when this human divine being experiences something in a moment or in a while, it becomes, it's like the intersection of all of the, let's say, the vehicles of transportation, all of the possibilities in one being. So that when we are with someone, for example, who is ailing, they're having a very hard time, it brings in the energy from all over the world, from through times in the past. You think of times in the future. It's bringing so much to that moment, to that being that we're with. Azerbaijan has spoken about hotspots before. And to me, this would be like the ultimate kind of hotspot, that we are this great intersection of presence that we can bring into life. And it's not only our single self that I'm speaking of, because we are all united in this one being, in this one that Pierre Beliade speaks of as the universe.
So those of you who have been with us through many, many classes, everything we've been sharing has been about that we have our understanding of ourselves and of reality by virtue of our relationship with whatever we are experiencing, that we don't really have an understanding in a separated state of being. And conversely, we don't really have an understanding if we're in a totally merged state of being where there's a loss of our identity. We are in a state of what we've described as relational unity, in which we very much still have our identity, but we're experiencing this circulation with whatever we're experiencing. And more importantly, we're experiencing the transformation that takes place continuously by virtue of the effect of the light upon light of ourselves and whatever it is that we are experiencing. We've talked about the barzakh, the interface. We've talked about the degree of what can come through. This interface is directly related to the size of the interface. And we've talked through many classes about when we can awaken to ourselves as multi-dimensional beings, then there's a much larger interface in which this relationship can take place. So presence is something that is emerging by virtue of a relationship, either externally in the world or internally through a subtle realm. Presence is an emergent property. It's what comes forth. And as I started to say at the beginning of this class, it's not something that's just coming from something else that we're now tuning into, that we think, well, we're raising our consciousness or we're raising our vibrational level to a state in which we can perceive something. There's some truth to that. We have to be able to awaken our subtle senses to be able to experience more subtle aspects of reality. But what is happening when that connection is made is that emergent presence. And we have something to do with the presence that arises. We contribute to the emergent transformation that takes place in any relationship that we're in a state of relational unity. So we can imagine that there's different degrees of presence that we can experience. The most limited one would be when we're in our typical dualistic state of consciousness and we feel separated from what we're experiencing, but we're just really trying to focus on being aware of what's around us instead of thinking about a lot of other things. We're just tuned into that. And that is a degree of presence. But if we're imagining a spectrum of presence, it's just a tiny slice. It's just a little bit of what's really going on there. And as we open up the awareness of more and more aspects of ourself, then we are making that interface larger and larger between us and what we're experiencing. And the capacity for the amount of presence that can emerge, that can arise in that circumstance becomes greater and greater. So here's another thought that is not probably the way we're used to thinking about things. It could be in the past, those of us who have been around very great teachers in their human form, I mean, we feel a tremendous energy and light coming from them, but oftentimes we tend to experience that as a one-way broadcast, that we feel like something is coming from them to us. And that's wonderful. I mean, we just really feel uplifted by that. Our vibration becomes harmonious with the vibration of that being. But what we don't usually think about is that when we are really in a state of deep connection, that what comes from our being, the light of our being, interfacing with the light of that great teacher's being, is having an impact upon them. It's adding something to them. It's enabling understandings and realizations to take place in them that would not happen except by virtue of that connection with us. So Pure Light would often say, dare you have the courage to be who you really are. It's very challenging for us to accept the reality of the greatness of who we really are. And I don't mean in an egoic, ego trip sense, oh, I'm great, and you're not, and I'm better than you. It's that everyone is has an incredible depth of being. But we don't usually see that. And when we have an experience that where we get a taste of that, we perceive what we're experiencing as other than ourselves. It's something else. When we have an experience of a subtle aspect of our being, the Sufis say that we continue to exist in all the realms, the realm of the jinn, the angelic realm, and so on. We continue to have a jinn body and angelic body, each of which is much, much vaster than our physical body, but we tend to think of everything kind of scrunched up inside of ourselves, like we close our eyes and we're going to go in and we're going to find something, but actually we're a small part of this much greater reality of who we are. But as I was saying, when we start to have an experience of this, let's say of our angelic self, we may experience something so vast and so luminous that we can't possibly conceive of the fact that this is us. This is an aspect of who we actually are. And so we think of it as something other than ourselves. And it takes quite a while to begin to accept the reality that we are existing on all of these different levels, that we continue to experience in all of these different realms at the same time as the physical realm. And it's possible to awaken to a state of what we've described as multimodal consciousness, in which we experience ourselves as simultaneously existing on many levels of reality, and at the same time being very firmly grounded in physical manifestation. So we're not spaced out somewhere. We're not just can't deal with anything because we're just so high and subtle. It's like it's all there, but our consciousness can't take it all in at once. It's too big. And so our consciousness can focus or modulate on what's needed at a particular time, and then we can become present to that. So we can think about the spectrum of possibilities on which presence can arise, and our ability to open to those different ways of experiencing presence depending on circumstances and what's needed.
Well, I like hearing you talk about presence in that way, and how that kind of harmonizes with what Pure Vilayat was saying. And it reminds me too of, well, in one way, how you and I teach together. And I've said before to all of you that we often have a lot of conversations ahead of time that are leading to this class, but also just are beautiful in themselves. And so some of that beauty is that we are allowing that presence from one to be receiving from the other, and back and forth and back and forth. And like we've heard before that Christ said that when two of you are gathered in my name, then I am there. It's this new presence that is created as we are open to that possibility. So as we kind of throw away the notes, or throw away the past, or hold the things that we hold on to, and thinking of who we are, and just experience that moment. And as Azarbash was saying, speaking about all the different realms or bodies that we have, the way that that is understood, and the way that we deal with the multiplicity of all of these different realms. It's just being open to that presence that is continually giving, that is continually offering itself right where we are right now. It's that freshness uh, in the, the Muslims' way of seeing things. They say that when you're doing the munajat, which is the meditation where you are feeling that you are in front of the beloved one, and you're feeling that energy coming back and forth, that creates a freshness of the eyes, so that your eyes are fresh to see everything in a new way. And that presence never stops giving. So you don't have a sense of, oh, it's my presence or your presence, but the presence, it's really the presence of God. And there's a wazifa for that, and it is Allahu. Hu meaning presence, H-U, and then Allah. And now, of course, that Pir Vilayat was saying that he speaks of God as the universe, but however you want to think of the divine one, Allah, Hu. So you can think of it, we can say this together, we'll think of it as the continual unfolding and the freshness of our eyes, the freshness of our whole being, really, in the experience of Allahu. So I'm going to say it 3 times to begin. And I'd also suggest this. Excuse me. You know, we give many different images as we teach, and there are many things that your brain might just have a hard time keeping up with all of this. But if you focus on the heart, center in the heart, and feel that presence now as something that is continually like a fountain, giving from the moment, but also coming from everywhere, in the places that you've been in the past, just that freshness of this moment in the presence of the divine. So let's say, I'll begin now, listen, and then join in. Allahu, Allahu, Allahu. Please join in. Allahu, 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 Allahu. Just pause for a minute. So it's not only the freshness of the eyes, it's also the freshness of our heart, the freshness of our compassion, the freshness of all the qualities that we know, the freshness of our relationships. All this is refreshed in that being, Allahu. So let's continue. Allahu, 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 Allahu. Pause one more time. And in this continuation, we're thinking of not only perceiving, but also what is emerging through us. So there's a freshness that's coming from within, as well as how we experience that one in manifestation. Allahu, 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 Allahu. One more. Allahu. And now we can continue just as the breathing. As we breathe in, we'll think Allah. And as we breathe out, we'll think Hu. Now, without any words, we just feel the essence of the practice of presence.
So let's return to the notion of the interface and the size of the interface. And let's think about the process of awakening on our spiritual journey. Awakening would usually begin with us becoming aware of our subtle senses, of the fact that there are even different subtle realms of reality, that they truly exist, and then that we can experience a connection with these levels. We can experience a circulation from, let's say, the angelic level to the physical, and the light that goes back and forth between the two. And then gradually we can experience ourselves as multidimensional beings existing throughout all of these levels. So this is, I would say, one stage, one grand stage of awakening, which is very important, but it's not the end by any means of the process. And the Sufis would say it's not sufficient to fulfill the purpose of our existence, just in quotes, because that would be quite a bit. That would be many people's notion of what illumination or enlightenment would be, just to be able to do all that and to experience all of that. But there's a reason that there's a manifestation. And there's a reason, not only that there's a physical manifestation, there's a reason that there's a manifestation of the subtle realms. And it's more than just the fact that it's said that our souls descended through these different realms on the way to physical manifestation and adopted the angelic body and the imaginal body and so on. It's not just that those enabled those functions to take place. There's a vital purpose to all of these different realms in the grand picture of things. And there's a purpose in the relationship between them. There's a purpose in the beings that exist on these realms. There's a purpose in the relationship between the beings that exist on these realms and with beings in physical manifestation. And what Ravani Ra was talking about, about that in that practice, about it brings about the light that comes to the eyes and the opening and the light of the heart. And I was thinking of, and you can look up the quote because I can't remember the poem. There's a Rumi poem that talks about there is a field and somehow it's beyond this physical manifestation. And he says, and I will meet you there. And I just started thinking about this for the first time in a different way that we usually think about the word field, because I started thinking before this class began tonight and preparing for it, that when we can engage in this connection, like Ravani Ra described happens between the two of us many times, not just in preparing for this class, but just in our beings interacting with each other, there's a field that arises from that. There's you could say a field of light. There's a field, the Sufis say a third presence arises in that circumstance. And now there's an interface that is much broader and vaster than the interface that can take place through just me by myself or Ravani Rao by herself. And in a way, thinking back to geometry, it's the difference between a line and a plane, between one dimension and two dimensions. And then you can up that to more dimensions. What can take place through that? A field is created that now enables a kind of not only presence, but wisdom to arise that couldn't happen through either person alone. And the same is true when we can make that connection, let's say, with some great being that may not be in physical form anymore. When we can establish that relationship, there's also a field that's established in that, that also enables something to arise that couldn't come from either person alone. So in previous classes, we've talked about the difference between acquired knowledge and presential knowledge. Acquired knowledge is what you've learned from books or what someone has taught you. Presential knowledge is knowledge that is revealed from your direct experience that's not coming from any external source. So once again, I'd say there's two levels or degrees of what this presential knowledge can be. One is what can just come from our own being in establishing the connection between the different levels of ourself, coming to the barzakh or the meeting place between the human and divine, and what arises from that. But there's even a further degree of wisdom that can arise when there's a connection of two or more people, like Ravani Rao was talking about earlier. The wisdom that can come from that is much more than what can happen from what can take place solely from any one person. So let's go back to one of my favorite lines from Ibn Arabi: every person has access to a unique part of the divine wisdom that no one else ever has had access to. And that's very much true. But there's even a deeper aspect. Imagine the permutations of the wisdom that can arise from two beings or more beings coming into this state of relational unity and this mutual co-presence. Now there's like a higher order of wisdom that can take place. And different traditions talk about revelation. And revelation, I would say, is nearly always thought of as a discovery of something that's there, put there in quotes, there in the transcendent realm, there in the Akashic records, there in the mind of God. But it's pre-existent somewhere, and now it's revealed to us. Something is brought down to us. That seems to be the perception of it. And that's certainly the way I thought of it for many, many, many years. But I've come to think and believe that revelation is much more than a discovery of something that's just been there. Revelation is a discovery of something that emerges by virtue of our connection with a more subtle level of reality. And it's the two sides together that birth what is being revealed. So in other words, what is revealed is what has been created by virtue of the relationship and the emergent presence between the two sides that takes place. And revelation is a never-ending process. There's no end to what can be revealed. So no more excuses about being bored. You don't have any excuse for being bored. There's an infinite possibility of what can be revealed that's never been able to be known before because it hasn't been there to be known. Now that's an awkward grammatical sentence, but I'll say it again. It's not because no one found the hidden website and here's all the answers. It's like the it is created in the process of this degree of relationship that requires the two sides coming together in the interface. And the two sides can be the manifest and transcendent in our own being. They can be, the two sides can be ourself and another person coming into this degree of relationship. The two sides can be ourself and something in nature or almost anything, but something that allows this state of relational unity to take place.
Okay, and so in all this grand story and all the multiple universes and possibilities, what brings it into fruition is what we call hima, or the creative power of the heart. And so this is where we get into that manifest being that is you, but not as isolated from the whole story. It is the story of the universe coming through you. And you, of course, we can say that's the uniqueness, but it's that pull, that pull that's always going to be there, that ishq, that we need to pay attention to, because it is that power that's going to do this dynamic that Azurbash was just speaking about. Can you speak more about the ishq that has to do with that?
Yeah, well, there are different directions, so to speak, of that ishq. One comes from our side, and it can be a longing for the divine. It can be, in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about the different kinds of yoga pathways: karma yoga, the path of action; bhakti, the path of devotion, and so on. But it's that channel that fulfills the passion of our being for something. We have a desire for something. It could be for the beloved. There's the path of jnana, knowledge. It could be a desire for understanding and wisdom. It can be a desire for good service. It could be colored, so to speak, by any number of divine qualities. It could be compassion. It could be to alleviate suffering. It could be to bring about healing. So that's one side of the ishq. But the other side, which I have described as what I call the eliciting light of Sophia, is it's kind of like a pull, as Ravani Rao was saying, something that draws forth from us a desire for something to come out from us, from the uniqueness of our being. And I believe that if you have to have an explanation of what started creation in the first place, here was God, what's described as the deep sleep of this ocean of uncreated light and bliss. Well, why leave that to come to the messiness of manifestation? Well, look at it. What's happened to it? Well, something drew forth that desire, and I think that what drew forth is the archetypal Sophia drew forth the desire from the divine being to know of him herself. So we say God created because God was a hidden treasure desiring to be known, but something had to stimulate the desire for the divine to know him herself. So that's that pull that's always there. That's that pull that at a certain stage in our journey takes us beyond the way we thought about it previously. Well, I want to be enlightened. I want to become illuminated. I want to go into the highest state of samadhi, but then something pulls us forth. Well, is there something more than that? Is there a reason why I'm here? Why am I different from Ravani Ra? Why are there different beings in manifestation? Why are there all the different realms? What difference does all this make? Well, it makes a difference because everything is in a state of emergence, I think, of wisdom arising, of a way of knowing emerging that can only take place by virtue of all the experiences of everything and every level of existence happening, the good and the bad, all of that goes towards the process of the distillation, the alchemical process of the distillation of never-ending wisdom. There's always more that can be known. There's always a further capacity for light to be expressed in existence.
Wonderful. And I think you'll recognize in what I'd say now, what I've said many times, it's about the compassionate witness. And I think I hear that too in what you're talking about, Azarbash, about the pull. And this perhaps is a little bit different in that when we can activate that part of ourselves who loves this little being that we are identified with so completely. It's kind of like our mother, our, you know, that one who just loves us so completely, that can reflect what's the deepest in our own hearts. It's kind of like this little chamber is created and saying, oh no, what you've been doing this all along, my dear one. You have been bringing all of the universe to this new way through your own heart, through you finding what is calling you so deeply. You are doing that in these different ways. So it's kind of like you seeing this, oh, okay, yes, I feel like I have been doing this, but there's something else. And so you feel that deeper pull. And you feel like everything does seem to be in place. Whereas a minute ago, it was like, oh no, I've done this wrong, and then this could be better, and oh, these people are suffering so. But there's this little magical kind of emergence that happens in that compassionate witness looking at you, and you now looking at the progression. And again, what is this but getting in the mind or the heart of the universe rather than this isolated. It's not even just seeing this one being. It's just kind of the viewpoint is wrenched out of where it needs to be. So now it's back to where it belongs, in this great love, and this unfolding love, and something that's new then is born in that. You know, maybe something is born in you right now that you're feeling, oh yes, this is that next step. Or oh, I feel so loved right now that I have so much more to give in a way that I never thought of before.
So that goes perfectly with something I wanted to talk about, that
Good.
these shifts from a previous state in which maybe we feel out of sync to one in which everything seems to click. Well, let me back up and just talk about water. There's different states of water. There's ice, there's liquid, there's gas. And in between each of these states is what's called a phase transition point. It's a place in which the nature of water changes from one thing to another. And we've talked so many times about fana and baka. Fana in the past being described as annihilation. I prefer to think of it more as just a releasing and an allowing, a letting go of a previous frame of reference in order that a higher order of integration can take place. So fana is a phase transition, and so is baka, because when things gel to that higher state of being, and then there's the in-between that we've talked about many times, in which things are unformed, and it's important for us just to let go and trust that we are moving. I think of it as like riding the thermal, the updraft, like a hawk soaring on a thermal and going upwards. And I've talked in recent classes about the rough phenomena and the gentle phenomena. And the rough phenomena is the more common one that's been described so many times in spirituality, in which we become entrenched in a way of identification with ourselves, and something comes along that really throws us for a loop that we can't do it that way anymore. It can be a very traumatic event in our life, a loss, a serious illness, a crisis that makes us question all the beliefs we had that seem to be working but don't work anymore. And then we're in what's sometimes been called the dark night until we find that light at the end of the tunnel. But as we progress in our journey, we can come to recognize when we've reached the end of one stage that has been adaptive but no longer is, and now something is seeking to emerge in our being, and we have to get out of the way. And that means not be trying to pre-configure and pre-engineer what it's going to be, but allowing it to arise. And when we can do that, that's the gentle phenomena. We can welcome that, and we can welcome the anticipation of the opening that's going to take place in Baka. So let's talk about, Ravani Rao was talking about Hima, and I wanted to, which is the creative expression of the desire of our heart, the deep desire of our heart. So I wrote down a little something earlier this evening. I said, desire brings forth blossoming seeds of wisdom in the new creation. Bringing forth our uniqueness determines the extent of clarity and coherence of what emerges in the space of possibilities. So to the extent that we have really developed that adamant sense of identity, and that doesn't mean, again, like an ego trip, but that conviction that who we are can never be lost through any level of existence we're on, through any experience we're having. We can never lose who we are. And when we have that conviction, that frees us to be able to operate in many degrees of presence and relationship and pioneering into unknown space of possibilities. But we have a seed of desire that can only come from the uniqueness of our being. It's kind of planting a seed of directionality. I'm reminded of those rock crystals that you put into water, and you put a string into a water solution, and then the crystals would gel around the string. So we're putting forth kind of like etheric strings of intention or desire that don't have a fixed outlook about what they're supposed to be, but it's a desire for an expression of something in a certain direction in the space of possibilities that is colored by the uniqueness of who we are. It's not the same as what can come from anyone else. And in establishing that connection and aligning with that eliciting light that I talked about earlier, with the Hima, the Ish that comes from our own heart, and we're letting those come into sync with each other. We're coming into resonance with this stream of outpouring of creative expression of our being into a space of possibilities. So just hold on to that for a minute without trying to analyze it. We're putting forth a stream that can form something as yet undetermined, but it's directed two ways: by the desire from our own heart and by that eliciting light for something to come forth, ultimately so that what we think of as the divine being can know itself, him, herself, in a way that could never be known before, And guess what? We are the human divine being. This is no different from us, but we are a unique aspect of that emergence of revelation of the divine being. We are both enabling that revelation to take place to what we think of as the divine up there, but we are actually helping to co-create what's being revealed. So it's revealed to us and to what we think of as the divine being. We've talked about everything being Gabriel seeking to announce itself and receiving the announcement of Gabriel from everything else. Well, there's a underlying, if there was a hymn of the entire universe, it would be for a continued outpouring of the possibilities of what can be known and what can be expressed. The palette, you think of the divine as the artist, the palette is all the divine qualities. The palette is all the vibrational levels of light. The canvas is all the subtle realms of existence, all the way down to physical existence. And guess what? Each of us is an artist unique in all of creation that is helping to create something that's never finished because it's always becoming more than what it was before. And you also get, as they say, that doesn't stop with the existence in this realm. This isn't the end of it. We have the priceless opportunity, as the Sufis say, die before death and resurrect now. Well, another way of saying that is, why wait till you leave this physical body to discover the incredible co-creative capacity of your being in relationship with divinity on every level, transcendent and the cosmic direction, and those possibilities start engaging in this process now. And then when it's time to leave this body, many mystics have said that the process of death is as easy as changing the shirt. What makes it difficult, again, the difference between the rough fana and the gentle fana is the attachment and the false belief that this is all that we are, and the trying to hold on to something that we can't hold on to because this body is not permanent. It couldn't be permanent, but who you are is. It's never going to disappear.
I know. What about just something they can take with them? This is so precious what you're talking about right here. A little simplification of some of this that they can take with them. You can lead us through a short meditation right now.
Okay. I remember someone wrote a book. It was kind of, I think it was called 3-Minute Meditations. It was quickies, but why waste time with details when you can get to the heart of the matter? So, okay, close your eyes and jump right in. You are at the cutting edge of creation. You are a pioneering soul who has answered the call to always open to more of what's possible and always be willing to let go of a way of understanding so that something deeper can come, and allowing the space for that to arise. So just take a moment and open to feeling this process arising in your being. You don't have to figure out how it happens. It's a natural process of existence. You've been entrusted with the keys to the divine treasury. You are the means for the expression and the experience of divine beauty, divine wisdom, divine love. God gives you life, and you give God life. And all of life is adding its song to the music of the spheres. May you always remember who you really are. And may you always be a most worthy exemplar of divinity in life. Amen.
Mhm.